We begin this hour with very encouraging news for the U.S. economy and for the Biden administration. Tonight, the president is seizing on the much better than expected jobs report as he caps a week of unexpected successes. Here's our White House correspondent, Jeremy Diamond.
Today, we received another outstanding jobs report.
Tonight, President Biden hailing another strong jobs report and promising more relief to Americans struggling with stubbornly high prices.
Today, there are more people working in America than before the pandemic began. In fact, there are more people working in America than any point in American history.
The unemployment rate dipping to 3.5% as the economy added 528,000 jobs last month, bucking expectations and tamping down fears of a recession. But the strong jobs report will do little to beat back inflation, Americans' #1 concern.
I know people will hear today's extraordinary jobs report and say they don't see it, they don't feel it in their own lives. I know how hard it is. I know it's hard to feel good about job creation when you already have a job and you're dealing with rising prices, food and gas, and so much more.
On that front, too, Biden citing progress.
We now have more than 50 straight days of falling gas prices in this country.
Gas prices are down 91 cents per gallon from their June peak. And now Biden appears closer than ever to a big legislative win, with a bill to invest billions to fight climate change, empower Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices, and make corporations pay a 15% minimum tax.
This bill is a game changer for working families and our economy.
The last Democratic holdout, Senator Kyrsten Sinema, signing on, but only after Democratic leaders agreed to add about $5 billion in drought relief funding and remove a provision that would have eliminated the carried interest tax loophole.
Well, we're feeling pretty good. This is a very, very, very big deal.
The Senate deal and strong jobs report capped a week of political wins for Biden that began with the killing of al-Qaeda's leader.
The mission was a success.
And also included the passage of a bill expanding care to veterans exposed to toxic burn pits.
The yeas are 86, the nays are 11.
Biden set to extend that positive streak next week, signing the CHIPS Act into law, investing billions into U.S. semiconductor production.
And Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has said that he expects to hold the first procedural votes on that expansive climate and healthcare reconciliation bill tomorrow. But before that happens, they're waiting still to see what the Senate parliamentarian is going to rule. She's reviewing that legislation currently to determine whether or not it meets the threshold and the criteria necessary for this bill to be able to pass with a simple majority, meaning only Democrats could pass this bill, which of course is crucial to the chances of this bill becoming law.
Well, certainly is. Jeremy Diamond at the White House for us. Thanks very much. Let's dig deeper right now in these new jobs numbers. Joining us, CNN's Matt Egan. Matt, so what do these jobs numbers mean for Americans' everyday lives?
Well, Wolf, this blockbuster report paints the picture of a jobs market that is red hot. Workers remain very much in demand. Companies are hiring, they're not firing, and they literally can't afford to lose the workers that they have. Now, the sheer strength of this jobs market is pretty staggering. No major forecaster expected that hiring was going to ramp up in July, and yet that is exactly what happened. And because of that, we have all of these major milestones for the economy. All of the jobs lost during COVID have now been recovered. The unemployment rate is now tied for the lowest level since 1969. The Hispanic unemployment rate has never been lower, and paychecks are still growing. Wages unexpectedly accelerated in July. Wolf, in the balance of power between workers and bosses, workers still have the upper hand.
Amazing numbers indeed. All right, Matt, thanks very much. Let's discuss this and more with the former U.S. Treasury Secretary during the Clinton administration, Larry Summers. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us. As you know, today's jobs numbers here in the U.S. far exceeded expectations. The U.S. economy has now regained all of the job losses of the COVID pandemic. How big of a deal is this?
Look, it's always welcome news when people are getting jobs. It's welcome news when wages are going up. But I have to say, I don't think it's quite as rosy as your report suggested. The principal problem of the economy for some time has been inflation, and there's nothing in this report to suggest that we're getting inflation under control. rather the opposite. Yes, wages did go up 0.5% last month, but that's about a 6% annual rate, and inflation has run at about 9% over the last year. I think our core problem, which is that we have an unsustainably overheated economy that's leading to high inflation, which is cutting people's paychecks, that unfortunately has not been addressed by the news in this report. So I'm glad to see it, and it brings good news to a large number of families, but I'm afraid we're still in the kind of unbalanced situation that you and I have been talking about on this show for quite a long time.
So all these very positive jobs numbers and unemployment going down, how much harder does that make it to tackle inflation?
Well, it's not so much that the jobs make it harder to tackle inflation, but when you've got large numbers of vacancies, which we still do, when you've got such a labor shortage, which we still have, when you have wages going up rapidly in dollar terms, but not in purchasing power terms, because prices are going up faster, you're getting more and more of a cycle. And that's making engineering the proverbial soft landing that much harder for the Fed. You saw that in the markets today, which are now pricing in the need for the Fed to engage in considerably tighter policy than they were pricing in just before this announcement.
So speaking about the Fed, how much are you expecting the Federal Reserve to continue to hike interest rates right now?
We'll have to see, but I certainly think they've got some substantial way to go. I am glad to see the bill that you referred to looking like it's really going to make its way through. And I think the lower prescription drugs prices, I think the measures to support and make it lower cost renewable electricity sources, to start to reduce budget deficits by raising corporate taxes. I think that's a positive thing that's going to make the Fed's job easier, going to make the economy stronger and better protected for the long run. So that plus the semiconductor, the CHIPS Act, I think are very, very important victories for our national economy. But I have to say I'm more worried about inflation tonight than I was last night. And I think it's misleading not to see things that way.
Well, the last time you and I spoke the other day, you told me there was a 3 in 4 chance, your words, 3 in 4 chance that the U.S. will enter a recession within the next 2 years. Do you still feel that way after seeing today's numbers?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This does not change that picture at all. The fundamental problem and the fundamental challenge that the economy faces is a kind of overheating. And this just shows that we're overheating more. We're in a house that's sometimes too cool, and we got a boiler that's a threat to explode, and the temperature in the house went up. And so we're more comfortable right now that the temperature in the house went up, but that doesn't make everything okay.
Secretary Summers, thanks as usual for joining us. We'll continue this conversation in the days ahead. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Just ahead, there's breaking news. A jury orders Alex Jones to pay millions of dollars more in damages to the Sandy Hook parents for his lies about the school massacre. We'll have details. That's next. We have breaking news on a second verdict reached just moments ago in the Alex Jones trial. The jury awarding $45.2 million in punitive damages to 2 parents whose 6-year-old died in the Sandy Hook school shooting massacre. This comes a day after jurors ordered Jones to pay the parents more than $4 million in what are called compensatory damages. CNN senior investigative correspondent Drew Griffin is joining us right now. Drew, tell us more about this verdict that just came down.
Well, it's quite a statement, and keep in mind that he's got several more of these trials to go. But the jury spent about better part of the afternoon deliberating over how much he should pay in punitive damages, basically to punish him for the lies he told about the Sandy Hook massacre and the anguish that he caused these parents. And then just before 5 o'clock out there in Texas, the judge. So the jury came back in, the jury came back, sat down. Alex Jones was not there when the judge read off those jury amounts that were agreed upon unanimously.
Question number 1, $4,200,000. Question number 2, $20,500,000. Question number 3, $20,500,000.
So that is a total over the past 2 days of $49.3 million, nearly $50 million to the parents of 6-year-old Jesse Lewis, who died at Sandy Hook in that massacre. And yet Alex Jones and InfoWars continued for years to say not only did he not die, but the whole thing was a hoax. I think the jury really paid attention when Wes Ball, the closing attorney for the plaintiffs, for the parents, told the jurors they really need to silence Alex Jones. Here is his closing statement.
That man will sit here and spew his lies and misinformation as long as he keeps getting a check. Because that's what Alex Jones does. He cares about his money, he cares about getting his money, and he pays people to ensure that he can continue that in perpetuity.
Fist pumps and hugs on the plaintiff's side, but on Wolf, on the Alex Jones's side, an empty chair. He did not hear that verdict live.
Yeah, he's going to have to shell out nearly $50 million between yesterday and today's verdicts. Yeah. The trial also included, Drew, as you know, information that potentially could be of huge interest to the January 6th House Select Committee. Now that the trial is over, where does that stand?
Well, there was a bombshell that was dropped after the jury left, and the judge was kind of just asked about that, and she said, so this involves the phone texts of Alex Jones that he claimed he didn't have, but were inadvertently sent to the plaintiff's attorney by accident, and that plaintiff's attorney even said that there was intimate messages with Roger Stone on them. The judge says, I am not standing between you and Congress on this, basically giving the green light for this information to go to Congress. We understand from Mark Bankston, one of the attorneys, that the J6 committee has asked for them. So we'll have to see if that actually is going to be handed over.
Yeah, we shall find out. Drew Griffin, thank you very much for all your excellent reporting. I want to bring in the state attorney for Palm Beach County down in Florida, Dave Ehrenberg, once again. Dave, so give us your sense. What do you make of this verdict today? $45.2 million in punitive damages.
Wolf, it's a big victory for the plaintiffs who have suffered for so long at the hands of this bloviating windbag. A lot of us were disappointed yesterday in that it was just $4.1 million in compensatory damages. So I was expecting a hammer to come down today in punitives, and it did, $45.2 million. Now, it may be reduced by the statutory cap in Texas, but it's still a victory. And it's not over, because there are 2 more trials just like this where he could also get hit with big time damages. And then there's the possibility that prosecutors could file charges against Alex Jones for perjury. So you got to hand it to this guy. It takes rare talent to turn your civil trial into a criminal one. So his legal problems are not over.
Yeah, I also want to bring in CNN legal analyst Joey Jackson right now. Joey, the judge could actually cap these damages, as Dave just said. Can you explain why and what that potentially could mean for these parents?
Yeah, at the end of the day, Wolf, this is obviously a big deal. I think the jury spoke. They spoke massively. And so the punitive damage award that they assessed really dealt with the issue of how horrific these lies were and how it impacted and affected this particular family. And certainly he has a couple of others to go through. But there's statutory caps, and what that means is that different jurisdictions limit the amount of punitive damages. What they do that for, Wolf, is they do that so it prevents ruinous liability, so that you don't take down any particular company. So while a jury can award 45, 44 million, 100 million, the statutory cap would limit it to a specific amount of damages, such that not this particular business, it wasn't aimed for this at all, it was aimed for the business community in general, to recognize that people can have relief. However, that relief, notwithstanding the jury's feelings, thoughts, views, and beliefs, and here we know what those views are, it doesn't ruin a particular company. And so that's what it means to have a statutory limitation or cap as it relates to punitive damages.
And Joey, the family attorney accused Jones of hiding his wealth, and he has enormous wealth, by filing for bankruptcy during the course of the trial. Will that allow Jones to avoid paying damages?
I think that justice delayed certainly won't be justice denied. Now, what the law does is you have to come into court, Wolf, with clean hands. And by coming to court with clean hands, it means that you can't dissipate assets or otherwise hide or remove assets in an effort and an attempt to stifle or otherwise misdirect or misappropriate and not allow people to get their money. So while I think that it'll have some effect, because the family will be looking where those assets are, they'll be trying to make an assessment and determination as to how they get them, I think that ultimately if the damages would dissipate it in a way that was fraudulent, they would dissipate it in a way that was an attempt to deny relief, that those assets will be gotten. And of course, there's other issues, as David mentioned. The criminal aspect is going to be big here with the Department of Justice, the January 11th. There's so much that emanates from this, much more than money, Wolf.
Dave Ehrenberg, let me get your thoughts on that as well, the fact that Jones was filing for bankruptcy during the course of the trial.
Something really needs to be done about bankruptcy abuse in this country. He's not the first one to do it and won't be the last. There are things called fraudulent conveyances, attempts to hide your money. There is evidence that he started to take away $11,000 a day from his companies to hide it after he got hit with the default judgment. And so something needs to be done about it. And I agree with Joey. Justice will be delayed here, but it will not be denied. I think that eventually the plaintiffs will get their money. And again, there are more plaintiffs lined up in the near future to sue him and get a big recovery.
Well, on that point, Joey, this is the first of, 3 trials for damages against Jones. What could future trials potentially yield?
I think they'll yield more relief for the families, if you could call it relief. You know, when you lose a young one who is so instrumental, I mean, it is your life, it's life itself. Any parent would give their life for their child. And when you have these conspiracy theories that are out there, that it's fake, it's a hoax, the parents are actors, etc., I couldn't even imagine, none of us could, how it impacts a family emotionally and otherwise, right? I'm sure they're just deeply depressed about this, and you have him out there spewing this hatred. And so I think there'll be accountability in those other trials, and that accountability will look much like it did here, with a jury coming back for compensatory damages, which are designed to compensate people for out-of-pocket losses, and then punitive damages, which are designed to punish, to send a message that this is just not something you should be doing, and it will certainly slow him down. And not only that, Wolf, but deter others who might spew such hatred and such negativity and such falsehoods about someone, which impairs reputation and just is so emotionally suffering.
Yeah, good point. Joey Jackson, thanks very much. Dave Ehrenberg, thanks to you as well. And to our viewers, an important note, stay with CNN for a special report on Alex Jones. Megaphone for Conspiracy. It airs later tonight, 11 p.m. Eastern, only here on CNN. Coming up, Russia now says it's ready to discuss a prisoner swap with the United States. Will WNBA star Brittany Griner finally be released from captivity in Russia? Stay with us. You're in the Situation Room. President Biden is expressing new hope about U.S. efforts to free WNBA star Brittany Griner from Russia. Moscow says it's now ready to discuss a proposed prisoner swap a day after Griner was convicted on drug charges and sentenced to serve 9 years in a Russian prison. CNN senior international correspondent Fred Pleitgen has the latest from Moscow.
Tonight, for the first time, Russia saying it's willing to engage with the U.S. on a possible prisoner swap to bring WNBA star Brittany Griner home. But the Kremlin warning talks must remain secret or they'll fail.
If we discuss even a few details of prisoner exchanges via the press, then those exchanges will never take place. The Americans have already made that mistake. suddenly deciding to use megaphone diplomacy to resolve these issues. This is not how they are resolved, so we will not give any comments.
The U.S. has said it's put an offer on the table to get both Brittany Griner and former Marine Paul Whelan, who's currently serving a 16-year sentence in Russia for espionage, which he denies, released. CNN learning that the Biden administration is offering convicted Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout in return. Secretary of State Blinken says Washington will take up Moscow's offer to negotiate.
We put forward, as you know, a substantial proposal that Russia should engage with us on. And what Foreign Minister Lavrov said this morning and said publicly is that they are prepared to engage through channels we've established to do just that, and we'll be pursuing that.
President Biden saying bringing Brittany Griner home remains a priority for his administration.
I'm hopeful. We're working hard.
The Russians say they want to use a mechanism for such swaps put in place after President Biden's summit with Russian leader Vladimir Putin in Switzerland last year.
As for specifically on the issue of persons convicted in Russia and in the US, I have already said that there is the special channel that was agreed to by the presidents. Whatever might be said publicly, this channel is still relevant.
After being handed a 9-year jail sentence, Brittany Griner's lawyer says the two-time Olympic gold medalist remains in shock, but is in a fighting spirit.
She's doing better than yesterday. She's still processing what has happened, but we tried to cheer her up. We told you about this huge support she's getting, in fact, and in Russia now as well, because everybody here is very much surprised with this very harsh sentence.
And while her legal team says they will immediately appeal the verdict, which they say was deeply unfair, they'd welcome a prisoner swap to get Griner back to the U.S.
It's just the perfect thing to get her home, of course. We hope that she will get home soon.
And Wolf, Brittany Griner's legal team tells me that they're not aware of any negotiations currently going on. They're certainly not looped into anything. For them, they say right now the important thing is seeing the legal process through. And for them, that obviously means filing that appeal within 10 days. They do say that the appeals process in Russia usually goes very, very quickly. It happens usually within one hearing. And unfortunately, the success rate for appeals in Russia, certainly not very high, Wolf.
Yeah, not high at all. All right, Fred Pleitgen in Moscow, thank you very much. Let's discuss this and more with Congressman Colin Allred of Brittany Griner's home state of Texas. He's been deeply involved in efforts to try to secure her release. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. As you heard, the Russian foreign minister said today they're ready to discuss this possible prisoner swap. Are you more optimistic for a deal now that Griner's trial is behind her?
You know, Wolf, as sad as yesterday was, and it was hard to see the impact that this entire process has had on Brittany. And I know so many of her fans, some people who care about her, seeing a 9-year sentence, is heartbreaking. But as sad as that was, in many ways, we knew we had to get through the show trial phase so that we could get to this point. And I think hearing Minister Lavrov, publicly say that now they're ready to negotiate absolutely is a positive. And, this is going faster, this process so far for Brittany than it did for Trevor Reed or for Paul Whelan. And that's also positive because that means she's had to spend less time in prison in the kind of the pre-trial phase.
You say it's actually a positive step that Griner's trial moved so quickly, but what message is Russia sending with this near maximum sentence?
Right. Yeah. Well, this is hostage diplomacy. They are trying to apply as much pressure to the United States and get as much leverage over the United States as possible by saying, if you don't swap for Brittany Griner, if you don't give us what we want, she'll face 9 years in a penal colony. And so that's obviously what they're trying to do here. That's why they wanted to wait. They said that they couldn't discuss a swap until under Russian law, but all of this is nonsense. You and I both know it's a kangaroo court. It's a kangaroo process in Russia. Once you get to this point, you have a 98% chance that you're going to be convicted. They took into no account any of the evidence that Brittany provided for why she had that cannabis on her. So we need to get this done. But obviously, we also need to, in the long run, try and prevent Russia from doing this.
As you know, the former Russian hostage, Trevor Reed, told CNN earlier today that Griner could face truly awful conditions in Russian captivity. How worried are you, Congressman, for Brittany Griner's well-being right now? She's heading to some sort of prison colony for 9 years.
I'm extremely worried about it, Wolf. This is an extremely tall and, a kind of well-conditioned athlete who's been through a lot physically as well. She has to have, an extra large bed, just for an example, because she's 6'8". And so I'm extremely concerned about the treatment that she may receive. We heard throughout Trevor Reed's time in Russia, the things that he had to deal with. My colleagues who are working on that, we'd be talking about how heartbreaking that was. We certainly don't want to see that happen here. But that's also part of what they're trying to do, Wolf. That's part of the leverage that they're trying to exert over the United States, is to say not only will she be here, but she'll be here under bad conditions.
You believe her future now ultimately is in the hands of Putin?
It is. It is. This is a, this is a form of diplomacy that I think is unacceptable on the international stage. We certainly, I think, need to, going forward, have a multilateral mechanism in which we can prevent any country from doing this, because, Wolf, other countries are watching this as well. They're seeing what Vladimir Putin is getting away with, and they're also going to see what the swap entails, and they may try and use Americans that they can grab for any kind of leverage over the United States. So obviously, in the long run, we have to come up with some kind of strategy. But our relations with Russia really could not be any more strained than they are right now. But Vladimir Putin is also isolating his own country. The great American players who've been going over to Russia to play in their basketball league, our women basketball players who've been playing over there, are not going to be coming there anymore because of Vladimir Putin's choice. He's further isolating his country.
He certainly is. Congressman Colin Allred, thanks for joining us. Thanks for all you're doing as well. We are appreciative.
Thanks, Wolf.
Just ahead, all the new evidence that federal prosecutors may be closing in on the former president of the United States, Trump, as they move very aggressively in the criminal investigation of January 6th. The vice chair of the January 6th Select Committee is warning the U.S. Justice Department about the potential risk of failing to charge former President Trump if the evidence is there. CNN's exclusive interview with Congresswoman Liz Cheney comes on the heels of our exclusive reporting that Trump's lawyers have now been warned that criminal indictments are, in fact, possible against the former president. CNN Justice correspondent Jessica Schneider has all the new developments in the insurrection investigation.
Tonight, pressure continues to build on the Justice Department to charge Trump. At the same time, prosecutors have ramped up their investigation in recent days, with subpoenas issued to several former top White House officials, all while CNN has exclusively learned Trump's legal team is in talks with DOJ officials about Trump wanting to shield the conversations he had as president from investigators.
I've been very clear. I think he's guilty of the most serious dereliction of duty of any president in our nation's history.
In an exclusive interview with CNN's Casey Hunt, Liz Cheney indicating DOJ must indict if they uncover sufficient evidence.
We're going to continue to follow the facts. I think the Department of Justice will do that, but they have to make decisions about prosecution, understanding what it means if the facts and the evidence are there and they decide not to prosecute. How do we then call ourselves a nation of laws?
The Attorney General has refused to divulge what prosecutors are planning.
No person is above the law in this country. Nothing stops us. I don't know how to, maybe I'll say that again. No person is above the law in this country. I can't say it any more clearly than that.
And sources tell CNN Trump's legal defense team has warned him indictments are possible, while the former president has grilled his attorneys about whether they actually believe he will face formal charges. Trump's lawyers have even advised him to cut off ties with his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who has defied a subpoena from the January 6th committee, though Trump and Meadows have still spoken a number of times, according to sources. Sources also tell CNN the Justice Department is priming for a fight over executive privilege, which, if they win, could open the door to revealing testimony from Trump's top aides.
Can the DOJ pierce that privilege by saying and perhaps going to court to get a ruling that Donald Trump's the conversations are misconduct and therefore not shielded by executive privilege?
Trump's spokesperson firing back that Trump will fiercely fight any moves to strike down his executive privilege claims. How can any future president ever have private conversations with his attorneys, counselors, and other senior advisors if any such advisor is forced, either during or after the presidency, in front of an unselect committee or other entity, and be forced to reveal those privileged, confidential discussions? And meanwhile, the committee is still sifting through mountains of evidence as it prepares for more hearings in September. And they're still trying to get answers on those missing text messages from around January 6th from both the Secret Service and the Pentagon. And Wolf, the Department of Homeland Security, is now saying that it won't any longer be wiping the phones of top officials without backing it up first. And this is all part of a massive review by DHS. A 30-day review will go over their policies for retaining these text messages since it's come under such criticism.
They got to do that review, indeed. All right, thanks very much.
Exactly.
Jessica Schneider reporting for us. Joining us now, the former FBI Deputy Director, Andrew McCabe. He's a CNN senior law enforcement analyst. Andrew, thanks for joining us. When you look at the scope of this investigation and the fact that the Trump legal team is in direct communication with the U.S. Justice Department, what does that tell you?
Well, there's no question, Wolf, that this investigation is active, it is vital, and it seems to be drawing a closer bead right on the center target, who we can all, I think, accurately assume is the former president. The engagement of Trump's legal team with the prosecutors is really remarkable, and I think it tells us two things. One, they are very concerned about what these conversations might reveal if they are not shielded by the privilege. The fact that they're engaging this aggressively and this early in the process tells me that they are desperate to keep those conversations off the deck. And the second thing, from a tactical perspective, I think it's possible that these conversations they're having with prosecutors is simply going on record with the fact that the president intends to essentially formally invoke the privilege in an effort to keep some of these witnesses we've heard about, like Pat Cipollone, like Patrick Philbin, out of the witness stand. So it's really a way of teeing up the fight in a preventative way for the former president.
So how much of a battle do you think we could see over this issue of executive privilege?
I think we're going to see heated litigation, Wolf. I think they're going to push this all the way to the hilt. They'll likely file suit over it in district court. If the former president's team is not successful, they'll undoubtedly appeal to the circuit court. And then ultimately, if not successful, they'll try to go to the Supreme Court. We're going to be talking about this litigation for many, many months.
Andrew McCabe, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf.
Coming up, China's dramatic show of force.